a young man torn from his homeland, dragged across scorching deserts to a city bathed in power and dark secrets. A city where gods were worshipped in gold and stone, where faith was challenged, and where kingdoms rose and crumbled. This is the story of Daniel, a man whose unwavering faith in the face of empire-shattering trials would not only alter his own life, but reshape the course of history itself. But there is something more, something hidden in his journey. A truth buried deep beneath the dust of centuries, locked away by the very rulers who feared it the most. And today we unlock it. What if I told you that Daniel's story is not just one of prophecy and visions, that there is a deeper, more dangerous mystery, one that speaks to the very heart of human survival, the power of divine intervention, and the relentless pursuit of truth? This isn't just the story of a prophet. It's the story of a man who stood alone against the might of an empire, whose faith defied lions, whose prayers changed the fate of kings. And in the end, his story will change everything you thought you knew. Before we embark on Daniel's journey through prophecy and peril, take one step deeper into the shadows of ancient Babylon, a world where the past and future collide, and the mysteries of the Bible unravel. The year was 605 BC. The mighty walls of Jerusalem, once proud and steadfast, now lay in ruins, crumbled beneath the unrelenting force of the Babylonian Empire. The city had fallen, and with it, the kingdom of Judah. The sound of destruction echoed through the streets, the cries of the vanquished blending with the roar of flames, consuming sacred buildings. A young man named Daniel found himself among the captured, his life forever altered by the hands of conquerors. Shackled, dragged across the vast expanse of desert, his fate uncertain. His journey led him to the heart of Babylon, a city so powerful, so decadent, that its very name would forever echo through the annals of history. Babylon, a land of unimaginable wealth, yet shrouded in darkness. A city where gods were made of gold, and where men's souls were bent under the weight of false idols. It was a land of corruption where every tradition, every belief was put to the test. And yet, this was where Daniel's story began. Little did he know this journey would not just be a test of his body, but of his spirit. For in the heart of Babylon, Daniel's faith would be tested in ways he could never have anticipated. Babylon was no place for the faint of heart. The king Nebuchadnezzar sought not just to conquer, he sought to erase the very identities of his captives. Those who were brought to Babylon were stripped of their heritage, their names, and even their gods. Daniel, along with the other young exiles, was forced to take on a new identity. His Hebrew name erased, replaced with one that spoke of the Babylonian gods. But Daniel was different. His heart belonged to God. No matter the pressures, the temptations, or the demands of the empire, his allegiance would not be swayed. He knew that the cost of his faith would be high, but he would stand firm no matter the price. As the royal court prepared to feed Daniel and his companions a feast unlike anything they had ever seen, Daniel faced the ultimate dilemma. The king's food, rich and extravagant, was laced with offerings to idols, an abomination to his faith. It was the ultimate test to conform or to resist. Daniel's response was not immediate rebellion, but a quiet challenge. "We will not eat," Daniel declared, "for it defiles us. But give us 10 days. 10 days, and we will eat only vegetables and drink water. Let the Lord decide." In a land where every temptation beckoned, where every bite of food promised comfort and status, Daniel chose the path of purity. His rebellion was silent, yet it was profound. And what happened next was nothing short of miraculous. 10 days, that was all it took. 10 days of faith, 10 days of trust. And at the end of that time, Daniel and his companions stood before the king's officials. They were not weaker, as was expected. They were stronger, healthier, more vibrant than those who had partaken in the king's feast. God had honored their commitment. They were not just physically better, they were spiritually stronger. And what the Babylonians could not understand, what they could not see, was that it was not the food that sustained Daniel and his friends. It was the God of Israel who sustained them. Through this small act of defiance, Daniel had made a statement. He had shown that the strength of his faith was not bound by Babylonian laws or customs. and in doing so, he had sealed his place in history. But this was only the beginning. Daniel's decision to stand firm in his faith had earned him favor in the eyes of God, but it also set him on a path that would challenge him in ways he never could have predicted. As the days passed, Daniel and his companions were not only tested in the food they ate, but in every aspect of their lives. The court would not forget their defiance. But Daniel, ever steadfast, was not afraid. He knew that the God who had kept him in the desert was the same God who would keep him in the court of kings. And soon this faith would lead him to a place of power and to challenges that would shake the very foundations of Babylon. As Daniel's wisdom grew, so did his influence. But with influence came danger that would force him to face not just the physical might of Babylon, but the spiritual forces that ruled it. A king's dream, a kingdom's fate, and a prophecy that would change the course of history all lay ahead. God had honored their commitment. In a land of indulgence where luxury and excess were commonplace, Daniel and his friends had chosen purity. And their reward was not just physical strength, but a supernatural grace that could not be explained by mere chance. This was a moment of divine vindication. Daniel's faith had already begun to set him apart from the rest. As Daniel's wisdom and faith grew, so did his influence in the royal court. The king took notice, and soon Daniel was called upon to interpret dreams that would reveal the future of empires, the rise and fall of kingdoms, and the very destiny of nations. In a land where knowledge was power, Daniel's ability to unlock the mysteries of the divine made him invaluable to King Nebuchadnezzar. Daniel had not just earned a place in the royal court, he had earned the king's trust. His reputation spread like wildfire throughout the empire, not just for his wisdom, but for his unwavering faith in the face of impossible odds. And yet with every passing day, a new challenge arose. It was not long before Daniel found himself standing before Nebuchadnezzar, summoned to interpret a dream unlike any other. The king had been troubled by a vision of a great statue, its head of gold, its chest and arms of silver, its belly and thighs of bronze, its legs of iron, and its feet made partly of iron and partly of clay. The king's wise men, his magicians, his enchanters, all were called upon to explain the dream, but none could. And Nebuchadnezzar, desperate, declared that all the wise men would be killed. The fate of an entire class of men hung in the balance. And yet Daniel, calm, composed, entered the king's court with the confidence of someone who had already witnessed the power of God. As you watch Daniel's story unfold, take a moment to reflect on your own journey. What stands between you and your deepest faith? What test of integrity are you facing right now? Like Daniel, how can you remain steadfast in the midst of a world that seeks to change who you are? It is in moments of challenge that we discover the true strength of our faith. Share your thoughts below. What would you do in Daniel's place? How can we, like Daniel, hold fast to our convictions in the face of a world that seems determined to tear them down? We're not just uncovering the past here, we're uncovering truths that can shape our future. Let's journey together. With no time to lose, Daniel knelt in prayer, and God in his mercy revealed the dream and its meaning to him. What happened next would not only save his life, but would set the stage for one of the greatest revelations in the history of prophecy. Then one night, everything changed. The king Nebuchadnezzar was tormented by a dream so vivid, so disturbing that it rattled his very soul. A dream that seemed to twist and turn in the dark corners of his mind, but no matter how hard he tried, he could not grasp its meaning. Fear gripped the heart of the king, and in his fury he summoned his most trusted wise men, his magicians, his enchanters, his astrologers. The court gathered in haste, but there was no answer. Nebuchadnezzar demanded they reveal not only the meaning of the dream, but the dream itself, a command no one had ever dared to give before. When none of his wise men could speak the words, the king, enraged, decreed the execution of all the magicians and wise men in Babylon. His anger was like fire burning through the palace halls, reaching to every corner of the empire. It was in this moment when all seemed lost that Daniel stood. Unshaken, Daniel sought God in prayer. The world was crumbling around him, the shadows of death closing in, and yet Daniel's faith never wavered. In the dead of night, as he knelt before God, the divine answer came. The dream was revealed to him, not just the vision, but its meaning. The next morning, Daniel approached the king's court, his heart resolute, his spirit unbroken. He stood before the furious Nebuchadnezzar, not as a trembling captive, but as a man with a message that would shake the very foundations of history. You saw, O king, a statue great and powerful, its head of gold, its chest and arms of silver, its belly and thighs of bronze, its legs of iron, and its feet part iron, part clay. This is the dream. Daniel did not just speak of the statue. He spoke of its meaning, each part of the statue representing a great empire. The golden head, Babylon, the might of the king's own kingdom. The silver chest, the Medes and the Persians, a kingdom that would rise after him. The bronze belly, the Greeks, who would sweep through the world with the speed of lightning. The iron legs, Rome, a kingdom that would crush all in its path. And yet even the mightiest of these would fall. For at the feet made of iron and clay, the empires of this earth would crumble. But then something miraculous happened. Daniel revealed that in the days of these kings, a stone cut from a mountain without hands would come. This stone would strike the feet of the statue, breaking it into pieces, and that stone would grow to become a mountain that filled the earth. This stone was the kingdom of God, an eternal kingdom, one that would never fall, one that would not be destroyed by human hands. It was the kingdom that would surpass all other kingdoms, the kingdom that would endure forever. At that moment, the court fell silent. Nebuchadnezzar, the mighty king, who had threatened to kill all his wise men, now stood before the truth, a truth so vast, so awe-inspiring, that he could not deny it. The king, trembling, fell on his face before Daniel. He saw the divine power that Daniel had called upon. Nebuchadnezzar, for the first time, acknowledged the greatness of Daniel's God. Truly your God is the God of gods, the Lord of kings, and the revealer of mysteries, the king declared. And in that moment, Nebuchadnezzar did not just acknowledge Daniel's wisdom, he acknowledged the power of the living God. But even in the wake of this divine revelation, the path ahead for Daniel was far from easy. The test of his faith would continue now more than ever. Nebuchadnezzar had recognized the power of God, but that recognition would not come without its own consequences. For in the coming days, Daniel would face challenges that would test not just his wisdom, but his very life. And so the stage was set for a new trial, one that would push Daniel to the very edge and reveal the true strength of his faith. Daniel's revelation had not only spared the lives of the wise men, but had also placed him in a position of extraordinary power. King Nebuchadnezzar, overwhelmed by the wisdom that flowed through Daniel, and struck by the divine understanding that Daniel possessed, promoted him to a high office in the kingdom. From prisoner to ruler, Daniel's journey had taken a turn no one could have foreseen. Under the king's command, Daniel was given authority over the province of Babylon. His insight, his courage, and his unwavering faith had earned him the trust of the very king who once threatened his life. The kingdom of Babylon, the mightiest empire on earth, now had a man who held not only the king's ear, but the favor of the Almighty. But even as Daniel's influence grew, he remained humble, grounded in the God who had brought him this far. It was not just his wisdom that elevated him, it was his faith, his integrity, his loyalty to the one true God, which shone brighter than the golden halls of Babylon. Yet in the height of his success, Daniel did not forget his roots. He did not forget those who had stood with him, who had shared in his trials, and who had chosen the same path of faith. Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, his brothers in faith, his companions in exile, had remained steadfast alongside him. And so, in his newfound power, Daniel did what many might not have expected. Daniel used his influence not just for his own advancement, but for the good of those who had stood with him in the furnace of affliction. He requested that Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego be promoted to high positions, as well positions of authority in the kingdom. In doing so, he demonstrated a profound truth. Loyalty to God and to one another could defy even the might of an empire. This act of faithfulness, of lifting up others even in the midst of power, would not go unnoticed. The entire empire would soon feel the ripple effect, of their unwavering trust in the God of Israel. It was a reminder that even in the face of great power, true faith and friendship could stand as a force of resistance, a force that could never be broken. What if your faith, like Daniel's, could change the course of history? What if, like Daniel, you had the courage to stand firm no matter the odds, to act in ways that defy the empire, to trust in something greater than yourself? What actions, small or large, could you take today that would leave an eternal impact? How can you, like Daniel, use your position, whether great or small, to uplift those around you, to reflect the light of your faith in every decision you make? We are all part of something much larger than ourselves. Just as Daniel's faith shaped the course of an empire, so too can our faith shape the world around us. Share your thoughts with us and join in the conversation. Let's walk together on this journey of faith, knowing that even in the darkest times, God's light will always lead us forward. But as Daniel's rise continued, so did the dangers. The more power he gained, the more enemies he made. The empire that had elevated him would now test him in ways far more dangerous than before. A fiery furnace would await him, not of metal and flames, but of politics and pride. And it was there, in the midst of rising tensions, that Daniel's true test would come. Stay with us, for what comes next will test not just Daniel's faith, but the very foundations of the empire that ruled the world. The golden image stood tall in the plain of Dura, glimmering under the scorching Babylonian sun. It was a monument to Nebuchadnezzar's power, a symbol of the king's absolute authority over the empire. A decree was issued: everyone from the highest noble to the lowliest servant was to bow before the image, to worship it as if it were a god. Fear swept through the kingdom. The great king's command was clear: defy it, and you would face certain death. The furnace was waiting, its flames stoked 7 times hotter than usual, a fiery cauldron ready to consume those who dared disobey. Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, 3 men who had stood beside Daniel in faith, refused. They would not bow. Their loyalty to the one true God was stronger than the king's decree, stronger than the fire that threatened to devour them. The king's fury knew no bounds. His face twisted in rage, and his commands were swift. "Heat the furnace," he demanded. "Make it 7 times hotter. Throw them in." The flames roared as the furnace was stoked. The 3 men were bound, their hands tied, their feet shackled, and they were cast into the inferno. The fire was so intense that the soldiers who threw them in were themselves consumed by the heat. But something miraculous happened in that furnace. As the flames crackled and howled, something extraordinary occurred. The men who should have been burned alive, who should have perished in an instant, were not harmed. They stood walking in the midst of the fire unscathed, and then a 4th figure appeared with them, not just a shadow or an illusion, but a figure who glowed with divine radiance. He was like a son of the gods, his presence undeniable, his power overwhelming. The 3 men, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, were not alone. God had sent his messenger, and they walked together in the flames, untouched by the fire. Even the fire could not harm them. Their faith, their unwavering trust in God, had protected them. They were standing in the furnace, surrounded by the flames of destruction, yet unharmed. And as Nebuchadnezzar looked on, he was filled with awe, unable to comprehend what he was seeing. Then, in disbelief, Nebuchadnezzar called out to them, "Shadrach, Meshach, Abednego, servants of the Most High God, come out, come here." And as they stepped out of the fire, the entire court saw that not a hair on their heads had been singed, not a thread of their clothing was scorched, and they didn't even smell of smoke. Even Nebuchadnezzar, the most powerful man in the world, could not deny the power of their God. He declared before all who were gathered, "There is no other God who can save in this way." The fire that was meant to destroy them had only proven the greatness of their God. But the story did not end there. The miracle in the furnace would lead to a change in the king's heart, but it would also set the stage for a new trial, one that would not only challenge Daniel's faith, but test the very foundations of the Babylonian Empire. A new decree would be issued, and once again, Daniel's unwavering trust in God would be put to the test. Stay with us, for what happens next will reveal the depths of divine intervention and the continuing battle between earthly power and the eternal kingdom of God. Years passed. The once glorious Babylonian Empire, which had been the terror of the ancient world, began to show signs of decay. The golden walls that had once gleamed with power were now losing their luster. Kings rose and fell, but the weight of time was heavy upon Babylon. It was under the rule of King Belshazzar, the last of the great Babylonian rulers, that the empire's final days began to unfold. Belshazzar, though powerful, was not wise. In a drunken feast, he defiled the sacred vessels taken from the Jewish temple in Jerusalem, the very vessels that had been used in the service of God. The king and his nobles drank from them, mocking the God of Israel. But in their revelry they did not realize the danger that lay before them. Suddenly, as the revelry reached its peak, a hand appeared, a hand that was not of this world. It wrote on the plaster wall of the palace, visible to all who were present. The writing, strange cryptic, was clear for all to see. Mene mene tekel upharsin. 4 words written in ancient script, words that held the fate of a kingdom. Fear swept through the palace as the writing glowed against the wall. The king's face turned pale, his knees shaking. No one could understand the words. The soothsayers, the magicians, the wise men of Babylon, all were summoned, but none could interpret the writing. It was at this moment, when the city seemed on the brink of collapse, that Daniel, now an old man, was called forth. Daniel, once a young exile, now stood before the king as a man of wisdom and faith. The king, desperate and trembling, promised him riches and power if he could interpret the mysterious message. But Daniel, ever faithful to God, knew that this was not a matter of fortune or favor. It was a message from the divine. Mene mene tekel upharsin, Daniel said. God has numbered the days of your reign and brought it to an end. You have been weighed on the scales and found wanting. Your kingdom has been divided and given to the Medes and Persians. The king's heart sank. The prophecy had been spoken, and it was unchangeable. The very night the words were written, the fate of Babylon was sealed. The Medes and Persians, once thought to be distant enemies, had already breached the walls of the city. That very night, the great city of Babylon fell. The empire that had ruled the ancient world, that had once towered above all others, was no more. Its king had been dethroned, its wealth plundered, and its glory extinguished in a single night. And the hand that had written the words on the wall had revealed the truth. There was no power, no kingdom that could withstand the will of God. But even as Babylon fell, Daniel's story was far from over. The fall of an empire was only the beginning of a new chapter, a chapter where God's hand would continue to guide his servant even in the midst of foreign rule. What would happen to Daniel in this new kingdom, this new world of power and politics? The next trial was just beginning. In the next part, we'll reveal not just the survival of Daniel, but his continuing role in the unfolding story of God's eternal kingdom. Under the reign of King Darius, a new decree was issued, one that would seal the fate of many. The king, surrounded by his advisors, signed a law that forbade prayer to anyone but the king for 30 days. In a kingdom that was vast, where power and fear ruled, the decree was absolute. Anyone who defied it would face the penalty of death. The punishment to be thrown into the lion's den, where the jaws of death awaited. Daniel, now an older man, had seen his fair share of trials, but this was different. His faith had always been his strength, his refuge, and no decree, no matter how powerful, could stop him from praying to his God. 3 times a day, as he had always done, Daniel opened his windows towards Jerusalem and prayed. He did not hide, he did not compromise, he remained steadfast. Daniel's enemies, waiting for this very moment, were quick to report his defiance to the king. They knew that Daniel's faith would not waver, and in his unwavering devotion, they saw an opportunity. They brought their accusations before King Darius. The law had been broken. Daniel was guilty. The king, deeply distressed, tried to find a way to save Daniel, but the law could not be changed. The decree had been signed, and so Daniel was led away, bound to the den of lions. The den was dark, its walls towering over Daniel. Inside, the lions lay hungry and restless, their eyes glinting in the dim light. The roar of their hunger filled the air as Daniel was cast inside. The stone door was sealed, and the echoes of the king's voice faded into the distance. For most, it would be the end, a certain painful end. But for Daniel, it was not the end. It was just the beginning of a miracle. That night, something extraordinary happened. As Daniel lay amidst the beasts, a divine presence filled the den. An angel of the Lord came and shut the mouths of the lions. They were silent still. The jaws that were meant to tear him apart were now closed powerless in the face of God's protection. Daniel, untouched by the lions, remained in the den overnight. His faith had carried him through the darkness, and the God he trusted had shown his power once again. When the king rushed to the den the next morning, his heart filled with dread, he called out to Daniel. "Daniel, servant of the living God," the king cried, "has your God whom you serve continually been able to rescue you from the lions?" And Daniel's voice, calm, steady, filled with unwavering faith, answered from the depths of the den, "O king, live forever. My God sent his angel, and he shut the mouths of the lions. They have not hurt me." Daniel emerged from the den, untouched, unharmed, a living testament to the power of faith. The king was overjoyed, and the entire empire marveled at the miracle. But the true glory belonged to God, whose power had preserved Daniel in the face of certain death. King Darius, overwhelmed by the miracle, declared to all the peoples of his kingdom, "Issue a decree that in every part of my kingdom people must fear and reverence the God of Daniel. For he is the living God, and he endures forever. His kingdom will not be destroyed, his dominion will never end." The king's words spread like wildfire, and the empire, once ruled by the fear of kings and idols, now trembled before the God of Israel. Daniel's survival was not just a miracle, it was a testimony to the eternal power of God, a power that could silence lions, a power that could not be stopped by the laws of men. Daniel's story did not end with his survival. His faith continued to shape the future of the kingdom, his legacy etched in the hearts of all who witnessed the miracle. But there is one truth that rings louder than any decree, louder than any empire. Faith, unwavering and pure, can move mountains and silence lions. As we look back on Daniel's story, let it be a reminder to us all. No matter the trials, no matter the lions we face, our God is greater. And in the end, it is his kingdom that will endure forever. In the next moments, we will share a special message for those who have walked the path of faith and endurance, those whose wisdom and experience can continue to guide us. Daniel's life, from the trials of exile to the miracle in the lion's den, speaks to each of us no matter our age or our stage in life. His story is not just a tale of ancient kings and empires, it is a story of enduring faith, unwavering integrity, and the power of trusting God in the face of impossible odds. As we look back on Daniel's journey, we are reminded that the trials we face today, whether in the form of lions or fires, are not the end of our story. They are the moments where our faith is tested, and like Daniel, we can stand firm. For those of us who have lived through many seasons of life, Daniel's testimony is a call to hold fast to the wisdom we've gained, to trust in the strength of our faith, and to pass that legacy down to those who come after us. It is never too late to make a difference, to stand for what is right, and to inspire the world around us with the power of hope. In the end, Daniel's story is a story of resilience, of faith that outlasts kingdoms, and a reminder that in God's eternal kingdom there is always hope, and that hope is never too far from our grasp. Daniel's story did not end with his miraculous survival in the lion's den. His faith, his integrity, his unwavering trust in God, these qualities continue to echo through time, transcending empires and generations. From the flames of the furnace to the writing on the wall, Daniel's life stands as a testament to the eternal power of God, who sustains and protects those who remain faithful, even in the darkest trials. Today, Daniel's prophecy continues to influence our understanding of God's eternal kingdom. His story is not just a part of ancient history, it is a living challenge to us all. A challenge to hold fast to our faith, to be steadfast in the face of adversity, and to trust that the God who stood by Daniel will stand by us. His legacy is more than just a story, it's an invitation to live with courage and faith. To know that even in our own trials, God is with us, guiding us through the fire and leading us toward his eternal kingdom. If Daniel's story has touched your heart, if it's stirred something deep within you, we invite you to share your thoughts below. What does this journey of faith mean for you in your life? Let's continue the conversation together. Like, share, and subscribe, and join us as we explore more of the hidden truths that shape our world today. Together, let's keep uncovering the mysteries of the Bible, one story at a time. As we close today's chapter, remember the journey does not end here. The story continues, and who knows what truth we'll uncover next. Stay with us as we continue to explore the timeless mysteries of faith.